let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with this interview that Nintendo released with developers who worked on that Nintendo Switch OLED system. Let's head over here. This was posted up on Nintendo's site, and I will link all this down below in the sources so you can read through this because it's very fascinating, some of the stuff they go over. If you ever wanted to really consider what happens in R&D and different things they are thinking about, this is something you'll want to read through. Now, the two people that were interviewed here, we have Ko Shioda, who is the General Manager of Technology, and Taro Yamashita, who is the Deputy General Manager of Technology Development Department. And they had 4 different sections they broke this into. Gaming consoles are destined to be most improved even after launch. The visible changes to Nintendo Switch OLED model and the invisible changes. The visible and invisible. And they tried to explain it as best as they could. Like visible, for example, they went over the screen. That's obvious, right? It's like, oh, I can see this. It's different because it's an OLED screen. It's larger. They went through some of the things they had to make this work, which included having the screen itself, that OLED screen, be thinner because they did not want this system to be any thicker. And they did change a lot when it came to the kickstand, for example, and even that caused some issues in development as they were looking to work all of this out. Like I said, it is something to consider in development from start to finish when they look at a system like the Switch we had, right, the hybrid model, the original one, and they're essentially working within the bounds that they had already created back when they released that in 2017. They want to improve it by putting a larger screen in, but they can't make the system itself any larger. As for some of the invisible changes, they did go over the speakers in great detail. They even have an entire diagram showing the difference between the closed type speakers that we have in the Switch OLED model and the open type speakers that we have in the Switch Lite and the regular red box Nintendo Switch. They also talked about the jump when it came to storage size from 32 gigabytes to 64 gigabytes, and they even went into details like the engraving on the Joy-Con grip. Rather than being printed, it is now just engraved into it, and the difference when it came to the patterns on that Joy-Con strap. And they even mentioned the HDMI cable itself being more, I guess, malleable or easier to kind of bend and move around compared to the older HDMI cable. And then they got to the dock, and this is one that threw me off a little bit. You'll have to tell me, I guess, exactly how you were managing your dock with your Redbox Switch, for example, or the original one. Like, they show a picture here, and it's the regular dock with the hinges at the bottom, and in my mind, you look at the dock, you see kind of that cutout there, and I figured, okay, yeah, this is where the cables are routed through to kind of give it a more clean look, so you don't have cables all over the place there on the backside. But according to Nintendo, a lot of the data they gathered, people just left the bottom part down, and that's why with the new dock, that whole back door just breaks off. I thought people were originally even breaking it by accident. No, it's designed to completely come off, and that way, if you don't want the door just kind of flop down, you don't have to have it at all. To me, though, it seems pretty obvious how the setup is supposed to be with the cable, so I'll probably leave the back on. It was just an interesting footnote that I noticed. However, I would say the most interesting part about all of this has to do with the 4th section because they get very in-depth. The Joy-Con controllers. This was asked. Another major characteristic of the Nintendo Switch is the Joy-Con controllers. A big part of the user experience comes from the Joy-Con, but were there any improvements? They go on to say the analog stick at first release cleared the Nintendo reliability test using the method of rotating the stick while continually applying a load to it with the same criteria as the Wii U gamepad's analog stick. As we have always been trying to improve it as well, we have investigated the Joy-Con controllers used by the customers and repeatedly improved the wear resistance and durability. The parts of the Joy-Con analog sticks are not something that can be bought off the shelf, but are specifically designed, so we have undergone a lot of considerations to improve them. In addition, we improved the reliability test itself, and we have continued to make changes to improve durability and clear this test. Now, this part, I guess, would be classified as an invisible change because they're specifically talking about that analog stick inside of the Joy-Con. They mentioned it's not going to look any different from the outside. We're just trying to make these tweaks and internal changes with testing and, I guess, the durability of that analog stick. So, yeah, Nintendo is working on the Joy-Con analog stick that really leads to that Joy-Con drift behind the scenes. They just, I guess, haven't been able to tackle it completely. And we're to the point now where Nintendo released a brand new system, and you have an entire consumer advocacy group calling them out over it. We see this over on Nintendo Life. Consumer advocacy group calls out Nintendo for Joy-Con drift ahead of the Switch OLED launch, saying this shows a regrettable lack of respect for both the environment end consumers. Now, according to Nintendo Life, this is from Euro Consumers. It's a group that represents 5 national consumer organizations and has issued a press release challenging Nintendo on its continuing sales of the existing Joy-Cons. Really, the issue here is, let's say they do happen to fix the Joy-Con drift. Like, they're talking about making all these changes to the analog stick, and it silently goes out in a new kind of Joy-Con vision, sort of. There's no physical changes on the Joy-Con itself from the outside. It's not Joy-Con Pro, for example. People are still just not going to trust it. It won't matter. So it's until we either have Nintendo make a full press release that's like, we fixed it, from here on out, all of these Joy-Cons that are releasing don't have Joy-Con drift that we've been able to replicate. And the problem then is, that means they were aware of it before, and they would probably end up losing a lot of those class action lawsuits that are brought against them now, and they're still pending and ongoing. So I think they're going to try to quietly fix it, or we get to the next Switch and they do a big blowout of, here's the Joy-Con V2 or the next gen Joy-Con. It's just a shame because the Joy-Con controller right now, this Switch generation, is always going to be looked at as a serious issue when it comes to the Switch. If they can fix it. Next up, let's talk about Microsoft.